Welcome everyone to this new AIEP video. I'm very happy to be here with Paolo Sachet from Sapienza University of Rome and Institute of the History of Reformation in Geneva, and Anthony Grafton, Professor of History at Princeton University. We are here to present a new series of patristic reception. It's a Brill series called Receptio Patristica, Studies in the Afterlife of Early Christian Texts and Writers. And I'm really pleased to be here with the editors. And I wanted to ask you, where did the idea of the series come from?
I I can't really I can't give you an autobiographical account. I remember talking with Paolo. I think the germ of the idea was his, but in a larger sense, the what we call the fathers of the church, this enormous corpus of writers from roughly the second century to the 8th century of the Common Era, um, were wait had they were waiting to be studied in this way. It's an enormous corpus of material, which has been assembled and edited and translated and studied, especially by specialists in patristics, so in the Cappadocian Fathers of the 4th century or in John of Damascus in the 8th century. And much less had been done until maybe a generation ago to ask how the study of these texts itself developed over time. And that's remarkable. We have more early Christian material than we have classical Greek and Latin material. The ancient writer of whom we have the largest corpus is St. Augustine. And it's only almost twice as much as of the Greek physician Galen, who's the pagan writer of whom we have the largest amount. So it's a vast amount of material. It's in many, many languages. The texts were originally written in many languages and then translated into many others. So the patristic corpus includes texts in Greek and Latin, texts in Syriac and Arabic, texts in Ge'ez and Armenian, texts in Coptic, just a vast range of languages and traditions. Moreover, the fathers of the church have been incredibly important in the history of Christianity and even outside that in political history and other fields. These are texts which include church councils, which set down regulations that were incredibly important about theology and church practice. Theologians whose views became the official views of the church or who were eventually rejected as heretics. You have both of them in the corpus. You have people whose ideas were tremendously important for church liturgies that were used for centuries, or for questions that really defined churches when, as in the Middle Ages, you had a schism between the Latin Catholic Church and the Greek Orthodox Church, or as in the 16th century when the Protestants broke away from the Latin Catholic Church. So these texts are always tremendously important, but it's not as if the people studying them could go to a modern library and find a vast rank of critical editions on the shelf and pull off exactly the volume that they needed. There were always questions of determining which texts were genuine and which were spurious, which were legitimate and which were heretical. The corpus is itself very, very loose at its borders. And particularly as we think of it, though we've called this Receptio Patristica, the series is open to people who can't in any way be seen as church fathers. For example, it would be wonderful to have a book on the reception of Perpetua, the Christian martyr, whose diary of her time in jail is one of the most fascinating early Christian documents, and certainly genuine. She is, however, no father. We are certainly interested in the reception of the Desert Fathers, and of course also of the Desert Mothers, so who also left apothegms about this life of Christian solitude in Palestine and Syria. So it's an enormous corpus, which was enormously important. Now, for more than a century, students of the classical world have been systematically studying the ways in which ancient texts, ancient images, ancient monuments were studied over the centuries. So there's an enormous body of literature. There are institutions like the Warburg Institute in London, founded as early as 1909. It moved to London in 1933, which is an institute specifically devoted to studying the classical tradition in all of its forms from its formation to the present. There are excellent journals that deal specifically with the history of the classical tradition and which take different points of view. Reception usually stands for a recent way of interpreting the afterlives of texts and writers in classics. And though we've taken that as our name, Paolo came up with it, and it's just a very effective name. I think that's by no means the only approach that we would want to see taken. We'd like to see 100 flowers bloom methodologically. So obviously, this can't be the only such center for these studies, but building a series like this seemed to us to be a good way of calling attention to the fact that there is a vast amount of material to be studied. There are tremendously important stories to be told, and to bring together a little bit the people who concentrate on this. The other thing that I think mattered to both of us is that there's been better and more elaborate and detailed scholarship on what the history of the patristic tradition, the early Christian tradition, from the last decades of the 20th century on. And people like Jean-Louis Quentin, who's collected studies from the first very imposing volume of the series, have really transformed our level of knowledge already. And so we thought that it would be good to have some of this really excellent scholarship available. So we hope to give, I think, as the subject itself demands, we hope to give a kind of model of a modern scholarly enterprise that is, if not quite global, close to global in its reach, that crosses linguistic borders, as the texts and the writers themselves did, that crosses methodological borders, and that really shows the interest of this vast area and brings more and more scholars to think about dedicating themselves to it.
Well, perfect. It seems to me that that's more than exciting as an adventure. And what do you see as the main lines of development of the series?
Well, I think you'll hear from Paolo about the different volumes we've already done, and the range is just extraordinary. So I don't think we really deliberately didn't want to concentrate on a particular period or a particular place. And so we already have an imposing range of geography, chronology, and language. But I think the main thing we want to emphasize is that studying the reception of these early Christian authors gives you a new way of looking at the intellectual history of Christian humanity, and indeed not just Christian humanity any longer, over almost 2 millennia. It sheds new light on the development of scholarship itself. This has been an area very innovative in scholarly techniques from late antiquity, when the Christians built libraries and archives and devised new genres of scholarship, like the history of the church, down to the the period that Quentin specializes in, the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries, when it was really church scholars who invented modern ways of, for example, studying manuscripts and studying the history of writing, the history of the material forms of manuscripts, and using those to decide which were older, which were newer, which were perhaps forged. These are all episodes in the history of Christian scholarship, and not just biblical, though that's tremendously important, but scholarship on the writings of the Christians themselves. So I think we want to draw attention to this. We hope to be a gateway drug for a few young scholars who could go in many directions, and seeing these books, and we think they're really extraordinary, will think to themselves, it's a lot of people working on those classical texts. This is a smaller group and a bigger body of sources. Maybe this is the way I should go.
Yeah, it's very much a bait. That's the yeah. Well, thank you, Tony. Yes, the it's hard to add anything after this prelude, of course, but from a more technical point of view, although studies on patristic reception are flourishing and thriving, and even more so, we hope, after these book series, the truth is that until very recently, there was no specific hub for rare creatures like many of us, we can say. So great books, including those by Lavinia and many other friends, had been basically hosted as sort of, rare birds in book series that had other driving interests, like theology, patrology, which is not entirely adjacent to what we are trying to do, or not entirely overlapping, classical studies, history, philosophy, and even art history. So the aim here was to create a sort of a safe space with no no confessional etiquette, which is also another we think important step forward. No boundaries in respect of languages and time and place, and even the very notion of afterlife. It is correct, but we would love to have someone, and hopefully we will, commenting on the reception of the text while the author was still alive, because we know that the difference sometimes is striking, and to in so much that it enraged the authors to see what his text and its words, taking a different kind of shape and form of meaning and origin, and many other here would be, a perfect example. So the idea was to collect all of this together, and we are very grateful to Brill, and in particular our editors Arjan van Dijk and Yael Isaacs, for supporting our ambitious plan. Tony already commented a bit on the title and meaning, and it's important again to stress that we included both text and authors, because there is a reception of text and a reception of the historical figures that sometimes is not exactly going in the same directions, sometimes, and especially with many authors that in many confessions were considered saints, or depicted as such. So that's another point that we wanted to emphasize, and focusing on the historical figures also allow to create some space for art historians that I'm always trying to call them out, and to, of course, engage directly with these enormous body of pictorial representation of the fathers that is there in every church, in every building, really, of related to cult and not and devotion, and it nevertheless is still very much untapped, we think. So again, this idea of bringing together and breaking lines is somehow embodied by what we decided to do with the book cover, that tried to combine the green and the red toning down a little bit the original orange of the two series of Brepel's Corpus Christianorum, because again, even the distinction between Latin and Greek fathers, especially from the point of view of the reception of that text, is very limiting, one might say, and should be reconsidered, if not overlooked, I would say, entirely. And again, the linguistic border goes beyond Latin and Greek, as Tony highlighted already, and we already started with books that are looking into the Islamic 8 world, into the North African universe, and one day maybe we can venture up further east into, who knows, into China and Japan. There is also a reception there, of course. Especially because another challenge that we wanted to take in is that there is no limit. So much of the body of the work that's been done is around the Middle Age and the early modern times, but there is a reception important that is still going on. Sometimes less visible, but we are working and publishing books that are also engaging with our present and different medias in respect of text. So the series is built onto three main pillars: brand new monograph, especially from new authors, but collective volumes stemming from conference or celebratory occasion like Festschriften, and a collection of essay by an individual author, that especially at the start is something that we are taking care of to show that indeed there is a past that we are trying to reframe into a more coherent kind of book series and space. And this is, of course, mainly by prominent scholars in the field. So that's pretty much my answer to your question.
And it seems that there are really a lot of new perspective and innovative trajectories that you are able to explore. And I really hope you get more proposals, because it seems like there is a lot of work that needs to be done, and people should be doing it. So I think I have only one last question, and if you could tell us something about the volumes already published and those currently in progress.
Well, I'll try to be very brief, because I can carry on for a very long time. We cherish, each of our program, each of our project very, very, very attentively. But Tony already anticipated that we started with Jean-Louis Campan's collection of essays on the patristic texts in confessional age, 16th and 17th century, erudition, theology, and censorship. And this is really a breathtaking journey into the history of patristic scholarship as it was taking shape, in fact, in accordance or in opposition to the classics during the religious strife. So we traveled from one Christian confession to another, from Oxford and Cambridge to Geneva, and then Leuven, Leiden, Venice, Trent, Rome. So it's really a fascinating, I'd say, experience. Then the second volume. And again, here we wanted to, emphasize that we are taking also new routes. Is equally impressive, I think, but is about the Church Fathers in Arabic translations, and it brings together a series of published and unpublished essays from Alexander Traeger, who is an expert on this, and publishing also some unedited texts that he found out in many Middle East monasteries, including the one at Santa Caterina in Sinai. Then again, we change scenario and centuries, and with the third volume by George Timmerman, we move to the Carolingian time, and this is a new monograph by a very promising author who will rediscuss the role of the political role that the fathers took under Charles Magne, and also how these affected or influence the canon that in many ways is still there when we trace boundaries in respect of who were the church fathers, who were the Orthodox authors that we should follow, who were the most saint. And so that's another very important, we think, contribution to the history of patristic reception. With the fourth volume, that is already in press and should be out. No, it's actually already out. Sorry, I'm losing track. It's been published this month. That's a second. It's basically a sequel of a very important book that was published a few years ago by Tony Lane, Calvin, student of the Fathers, showing that Calvin, yes, of course, he was a staunch believer in the Sola Scriptura, but he engaged extensively with the Fathers, even more than he is prone to admitting. And so with this second volume of entirely new material, Tony Lane carry on with the let's say, face-to-face comparison of Calvin and Peter and Augustine, Calvin and Clement of Alexandria. So that's also an extremely useful book to navigate the immense work of body of work of Calvin. And finally, the fifth volume that should be out next year is a collection of essays by John Monfasani, boldly entitled Italian Humanism and Early Christian Tradition. Literature, sorry. So that's again a way to attract more attention to the fact that most of the Italian humanists, if not all, with very, very few exceptions, engage with the Fathers. And of course, they attributed to them different meanings, but they definitely saw them and regarded them as part of the ancient past to recover. So there are many other volumes that will follow, from Syriac and other patristic florilegia to contemporary rewritings of a very important autobiographical text, the Confession of St. Patrick. And that this specific book I very much care about, because it's talking to us, to present literature, and how contemporary authors in United Kingdom, Ireland, and United States are using the Confession to somehow create new novels and about St. Patrick. So it very much focuses on present days. And there are many other projects that I can talk about, but perhaps one that would be of particular interest to the audience of this YouTube channel. One is a collection of essays by Claudio Moreschini in English, which we hope would expand further the readership of his spectacular essays. And a second one that is a collection of essays of the late Irena Bacchus, that used to work in Geneva at the institute I'm affiliated with, and that brings together the many essays that she wrote in the last decades of her activity after a milestone book about the historical method and confessional identity in the era of the Reformation. So yeah, many will follow, and we do hope this is just a glimpse of our program, and we look forward to enriching it with other projects, and especially welcoming would be the one coming from the audience of this YouTube channel. So do please reach out, including you, Lavinia.
I really hope I will. Well, I really thank both of you for sharing this new exciting series with me and with the members of the AIEP Patristic Association. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.